Okay. All righty. Again, I want to welcome everyone to our presentation on leveraging routines and to strengthen executive functioning, which is hosted again by Decoding Dyslexia Washington State, the Seattle Special Education PTSA, Inland Northwest Dyslexia Alliance, and Bellevue Literacy. Partners, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their very busy days to come here and talk about this very important topic and way to support our students, and just in time for summer as kids are, helping build those routines in the summertime when our schedules might be a little bit more inconsistent. This is kind of great. My name's Heather Schwint. I'm part of the leadership team with Decoding Dyslexia, and I'm also a member of the Seattle Special Education PTSA. I'm the parent of 2 kids with dyslexia, as well as being dyslexic myself. And again, please share in the chat where you're from, where your kids go to school, because this information really does help us plan future presentations. I would like to start by taking a moment with a land acknowledgement. We here in the Seattle area stand on the lands of the Coast Salish peoples whose ancestors have resided here since time immemorial. I would like to acknowledge this land and to recognize its longer history in our place than history. I would like to express my respect and gratitude for the Indigenous neighbors and to extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. Before we get further into the presentation, I want to go over some meeting agreements we have. Please keep your sound on mute and use the chat for comments or questions. Closed captioning is available and can be found on your toolbar. We're going to have some time at the end for some Q&A, and if you are more comfortable speaking your questions, we'll have some time where you can do that at the end. The organizations that are presenting this webinar to you today are all volunteer organizations. We have a combined mission to provide support to families and educators and to advocate for all students with dyslexia, as well as create equitable access to opportunities, especially around literacy for all students. Today is our last presentation in a year-long webinar series that's been called Supporting Your Dyslexic Student. Again, today's topics is about leveraging routines to support executive functioning. And it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Kathy Austin. Kathy is a literacy specialist in executive skills functioning coast here in the Northeast Seattle area. She's mom to 2 2E kids, and she's also dyslexic. She's in private practice, and she works with supporting families on their journey with their students. She's also the former chair of the Seattle Special Education PTSA's Dyslexia Committee. Kathy believes that leveraging a child's strengths to support early interventions is critical in getting them on the right path. The path to his career started when it became apparent that her children's school's curriculum was not serving her kids' needs. And now she is working hard to support policies and work so every student can learn to read, write, and use and build their executive functioning to allow them to reach their full potential. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
I'm on mute. Sorry. Thank you, Heather. It's really awesome to be back with my colleagues here. I've worked with lots of these ladies who are supporting these series of the Supporting Your Dyslexic Student series that you guys have been hosting this year. And I'm super honored to be here. So thank you for thinking of me. And let's get right to it. So leveraging routines to strengthen executive function skills. But let's start with something maybe that's a little bit more familiar too. Let's see if I can advance this. This may be a scene that you recognize. I don't know. It happens in my house very often. And I feel like I'm constantly asking my children to pick up their things, put them away, put them in their places. So I'm with you in struggling to help my kids learn their own executive skills. But we have our own little backpack pile on the floor, whatever that might be for you, whatever your little, if they would just finish or just do this one thing, my life would be so much easier. I'd save so much of my breath situations. So today we're going to go through why do executive function skills matter for dyslexic students and students with learning disabilities? How do you support your child to learn some of these skills? And then what routines are we talking about? And so
Kathy, it didn't seem to forward the slide. We still are seeing
Oh.
the title slide up.
no. Okay, let's click out of this. I'll stop share and reshare. Thanks, Heather. Let's see.
Thumbs up. We see it.
Okay. I need my little like panel back. Hold on just a second. I apologize. Okay, mess on the floor. Just imagine you saw that the whole time. All right. Okay, so sorry, flipping back and forth. And so you see the move forward, yes? All right, fantastic. Thank you. All right, executive function skills. They are high-level cognitive functions in the brain. And the framework that I use, there are 5 main executive function skills that allow us to think about selecting a goal, planning, organizing, time management, working memory, and monitoring your thoughts, or you may have heard it as metacognition, which is the hardest one to do. It's even hard for adults. There are 7 other ones that support the 5 main. We're not going to get into all of these like really detailed and individual. It's just important for you to understand that there's many that we can use to help our kids move forward in terms of strengthening their skills. Let's see here. So let's start with the brain. The executive functions are performed in the prefrontal cortex. That's that pinky part really at the front of the brain here. You're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen. And some of you may have seen like the demonstration where you have the amygdala as your thumb and you do your fist and you've got this front part of your hand as where the executive function skills are, and having the flip your lid. If you're having a moment where you're losing your cool or you're saying that to your child, you flip your lid, you basically have lost access, right, to the front part of your thinking, planning, organizing, managing your emotion part of your brain. It is the last part of our brain to develop. It takes about 25 years. And there's approximately a 5-year delay in cognitive functions for folks with ADHD. So I say this to you, not to make you think that your child will never learn to put their clothes in the hamper or pick that backpack off the floor. It's just to bring awareness so that you can what to expect with your child and that you can bring patience to this process, because it does take time for them to learn these. But with that in mind, it is important to note that executive function skills can be learned and supported at any age, even as little as 2. Like there are things we can be working on with our kids all the way through that young adulthood and getting them ready. And it definitely helps to offset some of those delays with either supports or training in executive function earlier on. So inside that prefrontal cortex is one of the functions is our working memory. And the working memory basically refers to this ability to hold on information and pull information from the past to the current moment and keep it all in mind while performing some complex tasks, learning and, learning in the classroom or learning, on the sports field or whatever it might be that the kiddo is trying to do. We have sensory coming in from our visuals, visual or auditory. It also can be tactile as well, which, either hand movements or other sensory things that we can touch and feel. But the executive, all those sensory things keep coming in. And we have kind of the central executive, or in Wired, we call it the coach. You may have also seen that kind of in some of the other kind of literature, you might hear people refer to it as the conductor. It doesn't matter. It's basically the person or the head of the working memory decides what's coming in and what's going to stay out. Okay. And let's look at this in a more linear format. So we have that stimuli that I just mentioned. But the thing that I want you to pay attention to here is capacity and duration underneath these yellow boxes. Capacity, basically, for our kids, they can hold maybe about 4 units of information at one time, 4 new units of information. And that time frame they can hold it is very, very short, if you see. And so if it's something that doesn't automatically, something they can latch onto or is interesting to them, or feel like something they can put into motion right away, they forget it. It drops off. And if we are talking to them too much, it can overwhelm the system very quickly. And then the other thing I want to note is that a unit really depends on how well they already know something. So let's say this is something like if you are trying to learn a new software, you've already learned a ton of other softwares. You know kind of the setup of how it works. You know there's a menu at the top. You know that you can find help and all those different things. But if you had no idea, if you've never actually seen how to work a computer or how to do the software before, you wouldn't know that you can go to help. You wouldn't know kind of your navigation around the system. The same goes for your child. If they've already learned to make their bed in the morning, then adding other steps to the morning routine is easier. But if they don't know the steps of individual components, it all makes it harder. So with that in mind, how can you support your child? With routines. But there's some things we need to know here about routines. Routines are actually more than a checklist. They're a series of cues that help build towards automaticity in something. It's like teaching them to go on autopilot. Like you don't think about how to brush your teeth anymore. You just go and do it. Even if you're sleepy, even if it's 2 a.m., you can still do those steps of brushing your teeth. The routines help kids build knowledge, help with transitions. It pre-plans decisions, what things to do, which can really overload, again, kids' working memories, especially in the morning, especially when they're tired at night. And so it's critical. It's almost kind of like a linchpin to all these other things that we're trying to help them build and work on. All right, so keys to success for you. What can you be doing? The first thing I'd recommend, so the training I did was with Dr. Peg Dawson and Dr. Richard Greer, and they've been working in executive skills functioning for over 30 years. And they have a lot of tools that are actually really great for parents, for teachers, outside of professionals working in the field. They have a survey they have created that's on their website, and that you can go and find out what your kiddo's strengths and weaknesses are, and it generates a report right within the web page. There's like a series, I think, of about 30 questions for you to answer, but it's important to understand like where their strengths and weaknesses lie. I'd also would recommend you take it as well for yourself to know maybe where your strengths and weaknesses are. Because if it happens to be that both your child and yours overlap in terms of this area where you are having, the most struggle for your kiddo and for you, then you might need to get some outside resources, or it's going to be just knowing that it might be a little bit harder for you to work on these things with your kiddo. It'll give you kind of that awareness and patience then going into the process. So, and we can leverage the strengths pieces of this too, to be able to build up those weaknesses. And here, I'm going to show you an example of what the report looks like. So let me see if I can move my little screen. Sorry. All right. So the scores, this is for a client of mine. I took the information off of their information. And anything that is over a 2 or at a 2 is considered to be a concern. The lower the graph, it's actually better. Those are strengths. Those are the ones that are really, really good. So I see a kiddo here who's actually really good. Ooh, sorry, I went back too far. Really good at actually creating plans and a little bit of the other one, that's time management. Those pieces could really help with the kiddos' weakness in organization. And what can we do then to leverage those things that they already have in place to help their organization skills? So this is what that report can do for you. If you can jump in there and take it's really, really quick to do. It took me less than 5 minutes when I did it for myself. The other thing which is a little bit different than things I think that we're used to in parenting, is we just want to tell the kids to do it and just kind of go do it. But in this process, for coaching them through learning kind of these skills, really want to try to incorporate the kiddo into the process. So co-creating whenever possible. Obviously, if you've got a really small kid, you're going to kind of, you're just going to guide them through it. But if they're early elementary age and on up, these are things that we really should be working with them, asking them, what do you want to get better at? What do you want to make easier for you? Is something that feels really too hard that you'd like to work on? And then you kind of work with them. Okay, so if you select one area, like what would they like to do then to work on it? Like what kinds of ideas they have. Kids are fantastic problem solvers, especially if they can bring, they feel like they're kind of meeting you at the table. And then when we get further in the process, like when I'll explain some more of these along the way, and this will make sense, but I want to introduce it now, is, what obstacles are in their way? What changes to the environment can be made? Like, do we need to remove things from a bedroom to make it easier to follow their bedtime routines, or, remove things from their environment or add things to their environment for homework routines? And then I like to work with my clients and with my kiddos and say, let's run an experiment. Kids love to be scientists and figure out okay, is this really going to work? This is my idea that I said, is it going to work? And so sometimes in the beginning, I know that the idea might not be the best one, but if I'm allowing the kiddo to kind of fledge out these ideas and work through the process, not only am I teaching them that they are co-creating with me, but also that they can be problem solvers too, that they can use their executive function skills to work through an issue and make new plans. The next one is keep it short. I am not good at this one. I have to admit. I am very verbose and I like to talk a lot, and my kiddos will sometimes just go, "It's too much, Mom." And so I find that I have to kind of pull myself back rather than jumping into problem solving right away. I need to think about how I want to approach this with my kiddo. Like if there's something that's those darn backpacks on the floor really getting under my skin, I want to go to them and say, look, I have, this is an issue, or if it's an issue or a problem that they brought to our attention, what's a really small stepping stone or baby step goal towards that goal or towards that outcome that you could be working on. And the reason why we want to do that is multiple. Well, first of all, it gives them a quick win, quick success, and builds their confidence in this process, because this is going to be new. This is something different, and they're going to be like, I don't know if this is something I really want to do all the time. But if you can give them kind of, again, that co-creation, but then also give them that confidence, and that these are skills that they can build, it's better to build up to those larger tasks or larger things that are bigger issues. like being able to control their temper or having some sort of, fight around homework, those kinds of things. Those are bigger ones that you would tackle. Using visual cues help you also keep it short. So in that co-creation process, you could make some routines that have visual cues on it, or you could say, when I tap my ear, that's to remind you that you need to be working on picking up your room or the like. If it takes more, I keep doing that, I apologize. Why does this keep it going? Sorry. If it takes more than one action to complete a step on the routine, that's not small enough. So unless it's something that they already are doing and that they have mastery in doing, and I tend to call those little subroutines. So I used this example already earlier with the bedtime or the morning routine. And if you want them to make their bed, if they already know how to do that, then that's great. But if they don't, then that's where you need to start. Like that, and they have to do it outside of, the rush. It has to be something they're doing and can automatically do. Okay. This goes along kind of with the keep it short as well. So if you're looking at this image, and it's just kind of an outline of what's going on, and I don't know if you can kind of guess what it is, but maybe it came right to your mind. Maybe it took you a little bit to figure out, and then you're like, what the heck is that animal doing? And what is it holding? And that's kind of like for our kids. Like if we're not really super specific, we don't know. Why it keeps doing that, I apologize. We don't know that it's a squirrel holding a book. We have to give very specific instructions to what they're doing. And so I'll go back and I'll harp on this, the bed making example for a moment. If we want them to be pulling the covers up, arrange their pillows, put their stuffies in a row, and tuck the bedspread underneath the mattress, we need to be very explicit rather than say, go make your bed and straighten it out. That's too abstract for a child. We need to be really, and for some adults as well, there could be a different picture in their brain of what you're expecting them to get done. And so if you want it to look like something particular, you have to give them the exact steps. And this can go for, behavioral kinds of things too. If we're looking at a kid to control their temper or to try to help them release some anxiety, like we have to be able to say, what does it look like to have a cool, calm temperament? How does it feel? What kinds of actions are you going to be doing? And it's same kind of, outcomes that we were talking about in the bed type of example. Like you need to be really, really show them, model it, pull up the blankets, tuck it in, take a picture, put that up on the wall of what it is that you're wanting them to do. Occasionally, we need to also bring in kind of a reward system or earned privileges for these things, because sometimes they're harder things for the kiddo to get going at. So if we're having trouble with completing homework without having 50 reminders every night or having some sort of power struggle, maybe there needs to be some sort of reward system in place. And we have to be very specific about what that's going to be. For every 20 minutes of homework that you complete, you'll get a piece of chocolate. Small, quick individual rewards. Or for 5 days in a row of not having an argument about homework, you're going to get ice cream. They're not all food, but like you get to go pick out a book from, the library at the end of the week. Or with times, this is also very important. So if you're expecting your child to complete something right after school, and they're thinking they're going to come home, have a break, and then complete something. Again, these end up becoming kind of power struggles and issues if you don't get really super specific from the get-go when you're working on setting out these routines with kids. Okay. Some things need practice. If it is something they're expected to do at school, Like, let's say, pack up their backpack independently at the end of the day and remember their water bottle and their jacket and their homework folder and the books that they need. And it actually, they need to role play it, and they need to make a movie in their mind or explain what that movie might be to you. Some kiddos don't want to act it out. They don't want to go through the physical movements, and that's fine. Older kiddos, is kind of mostly older kiddos who fall into this category. But if I ask them to be a director and tell me, what does this scene look like? And what kinds of items would there be? And what is the main character going to do? Then they're more willing to play along. And so going through rehearsal of these types of things that you expect them to do more or less independently, you could ask a teacher to give a cue or something. But they have to do the steps on their own. They need to practice it before they can be expected to really do it. And this can go for at home too. If there's something that they are doing at home that's harder for them, then that's another thing that we need to make sure that we're modeling, supporting, and sometimes maybe then pulling back a little bit, and you just kind of shadow or check in every now and again to make sure they're staying on task, but then also that they have this practice support throughout the process before you're expecting them to do it again completely independently, whether at home or at school. So I affectionately call this slide the tough love slide. This is one where it can be hard. It's hard for me to swallow the first time I was hearing it. A lot of our children's behaviors are in direct response to our own. And a lot of it is in response to the communication that we are giving to our kids. And a lot of it is because we're rushed. We're trying to go from one thing to the next, and we've got a lot of things on our plates. And we've got 50 million things we're trying to remember to do. But if we do not have positive communication ways, like skills, basically, if we don't try to practice them and put them into play ourselves, the reactions we're going to get from our kids are going to mirror ours. So I'll use an example from my life last week. So my kiddo came home from school. He had a little club after school, and we were meant to get to baseball. We had 30 minutes to get dressed for baseball, eat dinner, and complete his work from the day. You can see where this is going. So he automatically got really flipped out that he had to do any of his work, right? And so then I'm getting more frazzled. I'm getting more upset. And as that I'm ratcheting up, he's also ratcheting up. And it blows up into a full on meltdown. He's done. There's no getting of work done. And he doesn't know what to do. And he knows that he's got to get ready, and there's this time pressure, right? So it ends up just making it work out so that everyone's upset. So here's a list. I'm not going to read them. Like, this will be in the kind of slide deck when we share it, but it's kind of a list of reminders. There are plenty more also on the internet if you're interested in finding some more resources, like on Understood, or ADD-Etude has some really good resources as well for communications with our kids. If we can remain calm and still keep boundaries, like that's the other key to this. Like, we can't be like, no, you can't just yell at me. But at the same time, the way we say that and how we hold those boundaries really affect how we're going to be able to follow these routines, especially in the beginning when it's hard and it's different and it's not something they're used to doing. Because they're used to maybe, after school, they don't currently have a routine, and they're used to coming home and doing whatever it is that they want to do. And then, getting into the power struggle situations. So it's really, really important. I can't stress it enough in terms of, if we are frazzled and upset, so will all children be. And I know it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to try to do, but we all need a reminder sometimes. And so consider this one. All right. So we've talked about routines very vaguely. So what are we actually talking about here? We have 3 categories of routines, or at least I've categorized them in 3 ways. We have routines that are time bound, where, like I said, morning, bedtime, after school, and I'm going to get into some of those and show you kind of what that actually looks like. But then we also have event routines, like things that are, there's a triggering event or some sort of thing is happening that then there's a routine that would follow that. And then we have behavior events or behavior routines. Um, and those are harder. So I have these in order of easier to a little bit harder to execute, but you can get there. And these are ones too that we find sometimes on IEPs. So I've given a framework at the end of this for behavioral things of what you can do to model your own routine and what you can think about. Okay, let's get into this. So we have this one, understood.org. I mentioned this as well already. They have a ton of different pre-made resources that you can just go and grab, which is great. It gives you kind of an idea. I would actually, I mean, and if your kiddo likes it and you can just run with it, fantastic. What I would recommend, if to get a little bit more buy-in, especially with these kind of like bedtime, morning kind of routines, I would work on what it is that's really important for your family. Like, what are the 5 to 6 things that you really need to make sure that your kiddo is getting done to get ready for bed? And I start with getting ready for bed because it is the linchpin for a lot of the other routines. If your kiddo is not getting a good night's sleep, none of the rest of them are going to be able to get done very effectively. And so I would recommend actually just using Canva or, whatever kind of Word or Google, whatever the, I can't remember what the Google Sheets is the only one just coming to my brain, but whatever kind of page layout, document software you like to use, and plugging in selected clip art from the internet that your kiddo likes or thinks represents eating dinner, thinks represents getting ready for bed, because that allows them to say, okay, this is my routine. This is something I put together and this is part of what I wanted to do. And this makes sense to me, so that when you ask them, or when you scaffold to a point where you ask them just to go through the routine on their own, those images can actually pull that cue of what they're meant to do a lot quicker than words can, regardless of age. It's just kind of way our brains are wired, is that it's just a little bit quicker to grab that information from an image. I really like this one from American Academy of Pediatrics for just a really quick, really to the point bedtime routine. And so it can be a little bit more expanded depending on your kiddo, but really at the end of the day, we're looking for the kiddos to have a routine that they consistently follow, that triggers them to get ready to get their bodies to go to sleep. So the other resource I wanted to mention too is Pinterest. Is, if you're on Pinterest at all, there's a million different ones that people have created up there if you want to see other ideas, but don't get lost in the weeds too much. Just do a quick search, because I know sometimes we could be like, oh, there could be a better one that we can just grab and play. And by that time, you could have created your own with your kiddo. And the same, so for the morning routines here, I just a reminder, this this check backpack for making sure, I have this as an event routine, and this would be what I would consider another subroutine of what we need to do. There's a lot of different components. There's more than one thing you have to do to actually like get ready, get the backpack ready. So for these routines, I want you to also be aware of that and making sure that each item on this list is either already automatic. If it isn't automatic, something that they can do, that they need to work on first before you can expect them to do that completely on their own. And the same here for this one, for this after school routine. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to, here, let's go here. Here is our packing up backpack routine. And again, Understood has this really great page that you can print out, and they have a blank version of this as well. But just so that you can see, it's like they recommended just printing this out and putting it into a luggage tag holder, or you could laminate something if you have that at home. But I just thought it was really brilliant that they made it small enough so that's in a luggage, just a regular luggage tag holder that you put on their backpack. So they have on each side of it, they have what needs to go to school and what needs to go to home when they are at school. So this is what I would consider an, more of an event routine, is at a particular point of the day. So if it is the end of the day, I will check my backpack list to be able to go, to get home. And the kiddo may need like a cue from their teacher, but they definitely will need that practice at home and that kind of role-playing thing before you're going to expect them to be able to do it 100% at school with that time pressure that they have, right? Because oh my gosh, everyone's getting ready. We have to go. It's the lineup time, and right? So we need to make sure that is something that they have a little bit of familiarity with before we're expecting them to do it on their own. And so one of the other things too that I think is missing when we're looking at these routines or expecting our kids to do it is how do we use it? How do we do what if there's okay, this thing is missing, but some kiddos need explicit directions around that. Okay, if this thing is missing, then we need to go find it. Where could it be? Is it in your desk? Is it under, did you leave it in the independent reading corner? Going through this is one of those things with obstacles. Like you can figure out okay, and troubleshoot ahead of time with them. Where could items where have they left items in the past? And so that they can maybe check those areas to get that missing item, and then to kind of just go through the list until the items are complete. So for middle and high school students, they're changing classrooms all the time, right? And most of them are not using their lockers from what I understand. And so that is something too, you can make sure that they have this list, that they're quickly checking through this list before they leave each class, and making sure that they have all their items with them so that they're not leaving their water bottle in second period and they need it for lunch or, something of that nature. Oops, got out of order. There we go. So this is the other big one, making a homework plan. For our event routines, we don't have homework necessarily every night, right? For some kiddos do. So it's going to be, you're going to have to tailor this a little bit to your kiddos. And this one I feel like is one of the ones where reward systems end up being really useful. Most kiddos, they've had a really long day. They've been at school. They want to come home. They want to take a break, and they don't want to have to think about any of that other school information. They just want to go do the thing that they want to go do. And so sometimes we need to talk with kiddos as to why do we do homework? What's the point of the homework that we're asking, or that the teachers are asking them to get done, and kind of working through building a motivation and building through okay, if this is something that we don't do, what happens? And a lot of kids know, I don't learn the thing as well as I can. What happens if you don't do that? What happens, and kind of keep walking through the process of oh, what happens if we don't learn? Well, I'm not going to do well at school. Okay, what happens if you don't do well at school? And kind of keep digging into where this might be going for them, as to finding something that would motivate them to actually get to doing it. Also, this is where those questions are really important of hey, what's hard for you in this scenario, and for what's in homework? What are you worrying about? Is there a worry that it's going to take 20 minutes to get something done and it takes 5? A lot of the times I find out that kiddos think that it's going to be hours to do the stuff that they need to do, and it really is only 20 minutes or 30 minutes or less, right? Sometimes it's even less than that. The other day I pointed out to my other child, like, hey, if you would have done the work that we were talking about doing from the get-go, it would have taken you a third of the time versus sitting here now for 90 minutes arguing over the fact that you didn't want to do this work. And then so then I said, like, hey, this was later after everyone was kind of like cooled off, and not stressed out about getting the homework done. I was like, what was causing you to be so upset about not doing this homework? And come to find out, there's a particular teacher that is causing her some stress, and it was pulling up all of that stress for her homework time. So it didn't necessarily have anything to do with the work that she had to do. It was just reminding her of the thing that bothered her during the day. And then once we chatted about it, she's like, oh yeah, that's not great that it then took me that long to be able to get everything done. And I could have, done X, Y, and Z more fun things instead of that. So that's all to say, when you're making these routines with your kiddos, we want to make sure that finding out motivation, one, for them to do it, getting them a routine or a reward system that you can agree upon, and then working through the actual steps of the routine. So there's usually a lot of blockers, a lot of baggage that comes along with a homework routine. And this is one that I feel like kiddos need support longest in. One of them. There's a few others that take a while too, but this one, it can take up to a couple weeks for the kiddo to feel comfortable and getting into kind of that independent work, that independent routine of being able to put their own plan together for what they're going to complete their homework, and that making sure that plan that they've created is something they can do. My younger students, I do this with them and write it down for them, so that they don't have to then use their executive function skills to write, because it's a lot of our younger kiddos. It's still just even writing out simple things is a heavy load. So we want to make sure that we're taking the load off and sharing it as much as possible. It's actually a Vicki Nelson. She's a handwriting specialist OT. She says that all the time. Let me share the load with you. And so that is another thing we want to make sure that we do for these, especially the homework plans. So I'm going to take a water. Okay. All right. So the rest of the slides that I have, there's a lot of information here that I've broken out for a lot of different routines. I'm going to flip through them pretty quickly, but I'm going to make some more notes. I'm not going to sit on it as long as I did for the homework routine. And you'll have all this information. You'll have all the, I'm going to give my slides, and that'll go up on the Seattle Special Education PTSA's website underneath their resources. It takes them about a week to get it up there after these presentations are done. So I just wanted to plug that in here real quick. So don't feel like you also need to be writing all this down furiously. You'll have this, you'll get it if you want to go find it at that. If someone can share that link at some point. Rebecca, I think you've got it. That would be great. And then, so I should have said that a couple slides ago. So for the long-term projects or papers, it's basically this is a very simplified version of some graphic organizers. But depending on the age of the kiddo, so I've had students as young as like 2nd and 3rd grade doing massive writing projects, 5-7 paragraph research projects on animals, or an opinion piece, like at a very kind of young age. So this is not just for high schoolers. This is important from a very young age, and it takes longer when they are younger to get through this than when they are older. So if you have more of a middle school or even a high school student who gets very overwhelmed by writing papers or having larger projects, that means it's missing a routine. It's missing the structure around it for them in order to complete the planning process to be able to complete the work. And these are a series of questions and prompts to be able to help them cue your child through creating a timeline. The other thing I would recommend with these is to agree on how you will support your child through that timeline once you've helped them kind of create it. And sometimes they can get to a point where they're creating that timeline on their own, but they still need a little bit of cueing through the process in order to complete it. And then at the end of a project, I'd ask the kiddo, like, hey, how did you think the plan went? Like, what worked best for you? What is something maybe next time they would try differently? And kind of do kind of a little post analysis, a little debrief on like using the routine system and using the planning that they put together to see what they can learn from that as well. That is metacognition. That helps them learn how to think about how they thought about the process. And that is one of the hardest things for everyone to do. It's the last skill that comes online in our prefrontal cortex. And so practicing using those questions and those prompts, like, and thinking about how things went really, really helps to develop that earlier for kiddos. Okay. Studying for a test. I think what I'm going to say about this, it's very similar to what I had for a long-term project. What we were taught in school as far as effective strategies for studying, I should say, it can be well, I should speak for myself. The skills I learned as a child to study for a test were repeat, like of writing things out, or of saying things over and over again, or rereading a chapter or rereading my notes. Those things they have found out through the research are not very effective. And so I've given a couple columns here of strategies of things that are good, they help, but then things that are maybe a little bit better. And usually it's like basically the things that you get some feedback on, and you have to have some memory retrieval too that actually allow your long-term memory to come back up to the front of the prefrontal cortex for you to use that information, and creating that neural pathway over and over again for that information and that recall. That is actually the best way that you can study for things, or have your kiddo study for things, and telling them that and teaching them the aspects about how the brain actually works is what actually helps the kiddo go, oh, maybe that's what I should do instead for studying. So this is what I wanted to also share here with that, because it's not necessarily part of the routine, but if we don't have these habits or understanding of what they might be in place already, we aren't doing the most effective thing for studying. We're doing kind of more busy work stuff. And I should say, let me go back to this. So with that, like, that's a load on our working memory, right? So if we're doing things that are not as effective as they could be for our learning, we're overloading our working memory for no good reason. And then they're not doing, and then they're like, wait, what happened? I spent all of this time doing the studying, and it's not kind of cutting through to what they need to be doing. So the last event is family contributions. And I generally say this as contributions versus chores, because I think it creates a shift in kiddos' brains in terms of what they are thinking about. Like, chores have such a negative connotation. And so when I work with my students, I try to say contributions, because it's a wide variety of things. Sometimes, it's gardening. Sometimes it's helping have some more independence, practicing having short kinds of independence that actually help with the family. These all use executive skills to execute. And to remember. So remember, a routine is a cueing system. And so for anything we're asking our kids to do on the regular, we need to have a routine around it. And so if we're asking them to regularly pick up after dinner, help clean up the dishes or what it is, we need to break it down as to what that is that we're expecting them to do. Again, going back to that specificity and being very clear on what we want the outcome to be, how often it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and creating some, shadowing and modeling of those behaviors. And then slowly we can work back to them doing it independently. There's a ton of lists that you can find of various steps to take too. But I'd recommend creating them with your kiddo. All right, this one's the behemoth. Behavioral routines. These are written, so the previous two categories were written as if the child is going to read them and do it independently. These behavioral routines, the way that they're written is for you as the parent to coach them through how to adjust behavior. And so it's a shift a little bit. So if we've been working on, let's say they've gotten really good at getting their, getting home after school, doing their after school routine, which includes their homework routine, and they've gotten more or less okay. You've gotten a couple cues that you have to do, but maybe you have a kiddo who's still just really struggling with trying to problem solve or has a lot of anxiety. Or another one I have here is like they're just kind of losing their temper a lot or doing a lot of yelling. It's best to kind of work back and act as a coach. And so the way we do that is through that communication piece that I also mentioned, and empathizing, that's the wrong word. Welcome to my dyslexia, folks. And letting your child know that you're understanding how they feel, like saying, hey, I see this really makes you really mad. Like, and then listen to them, like, what's actually going on here? Why are you upset? And then rephrasing back to them, like, hey, so you're upset because little Johnny, I don't know, I have my slides over it, isn't going to play with you at recess, didn't play with you at recess. And then working on it, rephrasing it so that it becomes something you can work on it together. So you're not sure what to do when you go out to recess. It sounds like that might be the problem. Is that true? And then, yeah, if that's what the kiddo is like, yeah, that's really hard. I really want to play with little Johnny. I don't know the name again. I'm just struggling. So, hey, okay. So do you want to try to brainstorm some solutions to be able to figure out what you could maybe do tomorrow? And having the kiddo then pick one and ask them to experiment with it, because it may not work. It may not be the thing, like that's not their first choice, right? And go have them experiment with it, and then ask them also if they need help with the choice that they had. Is there anything that they're nervous about or have any concerns with that particular solution that they've selected? And then if that doesn't work, you have a whole list of other brainstormed ideas that could go back to be able to use in another time. This can also be a teacher if we're asking like teachers to go through this, but it's more impactful if it comes from their parent or a caregiver, because then they feel like that person is understanding their experience that's happening for this. And then you can create, like, once you have that shared understanding of what the issue is, then you can create a move into using executive skills and moving into the problem solving, or moving into trying to use a different behavior. So I'm not going to model this whole one like for the other one, but with controlling your temper, it is, there's a role playing piece in it that has to happen. So some behaviors are just about like kind of trying to use planning and organization, and other behaviors, they need to have that practice so that you can move it and have that sensory input and that tactileness of of the practice to be able to move it into something they can pull out and use from their memory when they have something going on. So like there's some triggering event that makes them really upset. And so they can switch out kind of losing their temper for the new behaviors that you're trying to do with them. And this is another one like homework where if you have this reward system, it would be a lot easier for them to remind themselves. It is easier to then pull in this kind of different behavior. And I would use a 2-tier system. One bigger award for never having to use like the strategy. Their behavior is just different. But a smaller reward for a strategy that they use. So if they are, having to go and take a moment to count down to 10 and breathe before they come back and respond, or if they are, whatever other solution that they might come up with as a strategy that they can use in lieu of, or instead of the having, an explosive more behavior. And I have created this framework that you can use for any kind of behavioral to implement any behavioral routine. It's a series of questions and reminders, essentially. And this is something you can take and leverage for an IEP, and you can finesse it towards IEP languages. And then also you can, please use it at home. So there's a whole different array of unwanted behaviors that we don't want to have kids do. And these steps more or less should work for most. But it's just kind of tweaking it where you're going to see where it fits the individual's circumstance of what's happening. So I've mentioned this a few times, experimenting and creating additional support. Running that experiment and rerunning that experiment, we have to sometimes do it. We're not always going to be really effective in running the routines from the beginning, and neither are the kiddos, right? So we have to kind of figure out like what's working, what the kiddo did really, really well, giving them feedback for that, for what they're actually doing really well, and doing it in a way that if you may have heard the hamburger approach or the feedback sandwich, where you're giving some positive reinforcement of behaviors or steps that they took that is really working out really well. Like, hey, how awesome, you got started on your homework right away. But I noticed that you were struggling with your writing part of your homework. Was there any kind of like help that you needed there? You could talk about that, and then finish it up with like, hey, I really liked that you had this conversation with me. I really liked that you picked up all your work when you were done and put it back into your backpack and checked your list, whatever it might be. Just kind of sandwiching, having basically more positive feedback than negative feedback when we're talking to our kids about working through these routines. And sometimes we have to just rework the routine. It's not working, the order of things, or we have too many things. Like maybe we need to start with 2 things on our list instead of 7 at bedtime and build up to adding more. And sometimes, remember our squirrel, we need to teach the kiddos the explicit steps. I think of the dog with the little mic, and he's like, squirrel. Our kiddos are like that, right? So model and teach the steps, how you would want them to do it or how they would need to do it. And then try to make sure that you're fading that support gradually. And so for some kiddos, that can look like, okay, they've been doing it really well for a week. And then I can maybe step back for a week and just kind of check in periodically. And then I stop checking in periodically. And then they're just doing it on their own, maybe. And that takes like several weeks to do that. Sometimes it takes several months. Sometimes it takes years that we have to go back into reminding the kiddos to do, especially like with event types of routines, or they're not things we do every day, and they're things that are more specific to, things that come up, like the projects, the larger projects they're studying for a test. Those things might need support for many years, so that until they can do those really fully independently. Okay. All right, so I am going to put a bunch of links up on my website. I have not done it yet, but it will be later today. All of the various things that you saw on Understood, and all of the fun neuropsych information. If you want to learn more about the working memory, I have a couple really good parent links that you can go to be able to dig into that, so you can understand more for your kiddos, because this is really just a brief overview. And with that, Heather, is there any questions? We'll open it up for Q&A.
We've had a lot of questions in the chat about resources. So, and Rebecca has been doing an awesome job of getting those posted when people ask and getting links to everybody. I haven't seen a lot of specific questions, so I'm going to open it up now. It is 1 o'clock. We had originally scheduled this for 1 hour, but Kathy has graciously offered to stay and do some Q&A. So, if you have a question, you can raise your hand, or you can unmute and go ahead and ask away.
Share, there we go. Michelle.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you very much for this amazing webinar that you're doing now. Thank you, Seattle Special Education, PTSA. I want all these slides right now, and I want them laminated. So I have a question about this PDA that my daughter has, though. It's not on the DSM-5, but I'm trying to find a happy medium of remaining calm, keeping the boundaries, controlling my temper, but I have to sustain some type of function in this house, and I can't do it alone. And so when I place demands on her, and demand meaning routine, right? We're trying to establish the routine. What was the word that you said? Call it family contribution instead of a chore.
Yeah.
So I am working on things like declarative language, phrasing things differently, giving positive feedback, but there's so much that triggers her, and even trying to make it a low demand is really challenging. So it is a lot like walking on eggshells, because you just don't know what's going to happen when you're like, please pick up the backpack and the shoes and the coat, then you're like, you don't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find a perfect balance here, and I'm trying to sustain it somehow.
Yeah, there is no perfect balance. It's a great question. It's a really great question. It sounds like you have to start smaller, and if it is a time, like let's say it's right after school and you're asking her to pick up that backpack, and they've just had like and they're totally like just their working memory and their prefrontal cortex to be able to control their emotions is offline. They have flipped their lid. Even if they aren't throwing a temper tantrum, they are some, not all, but a lot of kiddos at the end of the day, or at points of the day where you know that it's just everyone's tired. Those are not the teaching moments. Those are the let it go, and we're not gonna, this isn't the battle to fight right now. In a moment where she is calmer and has had more rest, so maybe that needs to be on a Saturday morning, we need to say like, hey kiddo, we're gonna start working on things a little bit differently. We're gonna try to solve some of these problems. And one of the problems I'm having right now is that this backpack needs to be picked up and regularly put here, right? But often it becomes a problem. can you tell me what's happening? And let them tell you. Let them work through, like, I can't do it at the end of the day. Okay, great. When can you do it? What time? And then come to an agreement. Like, I can allow you to have it there until 4 p.m. If it's not there by 4 p.m., if it's still there by 4 p.m., then, working through some sort of whatever system in your family works of like, okay, does she then lose privileges for the next day? Does she lose access to going to a friend's house or, whatever it might be? But more conversely, that would help better is if it's done by 4 p.m., you get whatever this reward that you have agreed on with them. Whatever motivates them to do stuff. Some kiddos, it's playing Minecraft. Some kiddos, it's having a little tiny piece of chocolate. Some kiddos, it's, being able to get a Pokemon card or 20 minutes of like doing whatever they want to do in the shower. I don't know. Like it's whatever's the motivating factor for your kiddo. Like they all vary. Like it's so widely. And so having more conversations in a moment where they are not already flipped to their lid is going to allow you to make that transition. And then just patience. I hope that answered your question. And I saw someone else's hand.
Yeah, hi, Kathy. Hi, so thank you very much. You all have done a fantastic job. I was all queued up, following up all these slides and everything, although I joined a little late, and it was nice to see that you guys will be allowing a replay for us to see it again. So my question pertained to ADHD, which seems to be a bit prevalent possibly in our family with at least 2 kids. So, but I don't know whether time allows. I wouldn't be rude enough to bog down with a question which needs more time. So feel free if you don't have time. We can attend it next time. It's a question on ADHD. Is it relevant? And do you think you have time to attend that?
What do you mean by relevant? I guess I'm not.
No, meaning that we're talking about the brain and how the brain, development in kids with a special angle to that. So it seems to be relevant, of course, but time allowed?
No, yeah, we have a few minutes. Yeah, absolutely. So shoot.
Okay, so a child who goes through different phases of ADHD in the personality, which is from a point of issues of execution, not doing his or her homework on time, not following up on things, not able to concentrate and focus on things which are being told, and that gets that child into a lot of issues, not only at home, but in the school and at the various forums. So there is multiple issues that child faces in terms of relationship, in terms of behavioral issues, in terms of, personality and all that. So I know that there is no quick fix in something like that, isn't it? And I know that the parents and the family has to show a face of patience and, a lot of tolerance, and be wise enough to put up with that. But is there anything in terms of a checklist or anything which one can, go through and able to handle that more efficiently?
So if you don't mind sharing, how old the kiddo?
We're talking about, of course, different ages,
Okay.
starting.
So across the family. So if it is more like you're looking to, so I would start with bedtime routines. Always start with bedtime routines. If we don't have enough sleep, we don't have the capacity to be able to, especially for kiddos with ADHD, you don't have the capacity to be able to attend the way that you would need to be able to adjust behaviors, adjust steps. For kiddos with ADHD, it's cues. It's all of these routines is deciding what those cues might be to keep them on track. And then frequency, like how often you're going to check in with them. And so if it's like a 5-year-old and you're asking them to clean up their room independently, It's going to need a lot more like support at the beginning, and not just like, here, little kiddo, like pick up all this stuff on the floor and I'll be back in 5 minutes to check and make sure that you're doing it. There's a lot more modeling that's going to happen versus like if we've got a 13-year-old and, you know, I would work on like categorical things and then come back and check on them. So with that said, with the older kiddos, I would say 5th grade and above, I would really be involving them in the conversation of what do they want to work on, and really getting buy-in and motivation. It's a huge thing that the certification process that I went through for the executive skills coaching is these things, especially for kids with ADHD, if they don't have any kind of tie or wanting or understanding as to why you're asking them to do these things that completely feel ill, like just, is this totally irrelevant for the thing I want to do right now because I have this story going in my brain, or I have this project I know that I want to work on that I've been thinking about off and on in between all the things that you just told me to do. And you know, it's kind of pulling it back and being like, hey, again, going back to the series of questions, what do you want to work on? What do you want to get better at? What's something that's a struggle for you? What's something that's hard, you know, and using the appropriate kiddos, you know, whatever terms you would have for them, and really kind of focusing in on those things first and putting your agenda to the side for a little while. Like if your agenda is that you really want them to do their homework after school and not have an argument with it, well, they need some small wins first, of their own, like, you know, directing from their own side of things before you can start to ask them to do those things for you. And so building up slowly, slow, starting simple, and working towards those larger things that take a lot more working memory and a lot more moving past, you know, to something that is not preferred. Like if it's not a preferred task, like it's really hard to move that. So having reward systems if necessary for a short time, it doesn't have to stay there forever. Those are the things that I would start with. And then build. Yeah.
Sounds absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions? I don't see any other hands raised right now.
Were there any in the chat?
There is one in the chat. There was one in the chat from Alice.
Yeah, from Alice, I see it. So my daughter has a possible ADHD, but also high anxiety. I want her to have a routine, but I don't want to overwhelm her. Anything you can recommend alongside breaking it down into small steps?
Right.
Thanks.
I would start simple, like with one thing, with one area. And depending on the age of the kiddo, I think I'm gonna sound like a broken record. If we're looking at kiddos who are older, like 5th grade and above, it's talking with them about, again, what do they want to work on? What do they want to get better at? Or, you know, what's troubling them? It's something that they want to improve in. And then for you though, as a parent, it's going to go back to the bedtime routine. If they're really solid in a bedtime routine, if that's something that you feel like is great, then I would move to a different time of day routine. So like if it's like, you know, the morning routine before school or the after school, and working it up. So starting with like a few things only in the morning and asking them, and externalizing things, and putting it into this checklist, especially for anxiety, ADHD as well, but in the anxiety piece of it, so that you don't have to be verbally telling her things often. That will reduce the anxiety load and also that cognitive load. And so, and it will give her empowerment. Like, these are the steps that I need to do to get this thing done, and giving lots and lots of good feedback as to what went well. And letting the smaller things that are not exactly perfect for the way you would want it slide for a while, and then you can correct them later. But she needs the it's the wrong term, but like needs that safety net of knowing that, hey, by doing these routines, this actually helps me. And especially like routines are one of the most calming things we can do for all kids, no matter where they come from. Even though they might fight it at first, by knowing that these are the steps we're going to follow for bedtime, these are the steps we're going to follow for morning, for after school, etc. Those are going to help alleviate some of the behavioral things that you see. Hope that
Yeah.
answers. Yeah, I think it did.
Jenny's got her hand up. Jen Song.
Hi, Jen.
Hello. Very useful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also have undiagnosed, likely ADHD. So having my kid also recently get diagnosed, there are some executive functioning issues in the family overall. Are there things that we can do to model? Like, are there things that I'm undermining by doing or not doing? Because like my organization is also terrible and our house is a bit of a mess. So yeah.
Yes, I appreciate your question. There's many folks who are in that. It's perfect. That's a great question. The thing I would start with is going back to that link that I shared early for the Smart But Scattered executive skills questionnaire, and doing a quick understanding as to where you're at and where the other folks in your household are at, and seeing again where those strengths align or if they don't, and where the weaknesses align or if they don't, and figuring out where you as the parent can use your strengths to help with some of the things that are going on. And for like, so once you have that understanding, like being able to use those strengths, it's really going to be like you have to do some of your own work a little bit before you can help the kiddo. So if it's something you really want your kiddo to do, pick up their clothes off the floor, like as an example, maybe, then maybe that's something that like, hey kid, I'm working on this too. This is hard for me too. And then knowing they're not alone in the battle of trying to get better at that executive function skill is great. It's a great conversation to have. It's totally humbling for you, but also for the kiddo to be like, hey, I'm not in this by myself. It's okay that it's not perfect all the time. And then giving yourselves congratulatory rewards when you all do it. Like, that's awesome. Like, and so it takes longer. I'm not gonna, be a lie. Like, but at the same time, like, it really helps your kiddo see that it's something it's good to work on. Like, hey, it's giving them that problem solving. You're showing metacognition. You're showing how to do you're walking the talk basically. So don't feel like you have to have it all figured out. But if it's something that is more complex, like just like you think you're like some folks go into like, I need to have this all figured out. Like I'm gonna need my house completely clean before I can ask my kid to do it. I would say no, just like work on something, pull it back for yourself, keep it simple, go back to those keys to success. What does it look like to be successful for whatever it is that you're trying to work on for yourself? You need to define that for you. And then so that you have it for your kiddos. Yeah. And just be really patient with yourself, because it's going to be a little bit of a trouble thing at the beginning. Troubleshooting, sorry. Thanks, Jen. Good question. Anything else? I have
Any
like
other
5 more minutes.
questions? Well, it looks like those are all of our questions for today. I want to thank everyone again for coming and participating in this webinar. I really want to thank Kathy for presenting and sharing her knowledge and giving us all these great tips and tools to apply with our own students. I think this was a wonderful way to end out this year-long series on supporting your dyslexic students. Again, I know in the chat, Rebecca has put in the resource page with the Seattle Special Education PTSA. The recordings and the slide decks from those previous webinars are all posted there. This one should be up relatively soon. Please follow the Seattle Special Education PTSA on Eventbrite. That is the best way to find out about upcoming lectures. Also follow us on Facebook along with the other organizations that are helping us present today, the Inland Northwest Dyslexia Alliance, Bellevue Literacy and Decoding Dyslexia, Washington State. All of those, all of our partners have excellent resources for students who have language-based learning differences, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. There's lots of great supports for possibly even resources closer to where you are in the state of Washington. So please be sure to check out those websites. I want to thank all our partners. This has been a really big project for us. This is our first big year-long series. We're looking to do something similar again next year, taking feedback that we've gotten from this series and applying it for how we can support families, parents, and teachers in the future. So again, I want to thank everybody and have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you all for having me.